What if the person screaming beside the dead body already knew the victim was dead? Monte Carlo, a glittering casino, a room filled with champagne, diamonds, and 5 perfectly innocent-looking guests. Then Sir Reginald Ashcombe is found dead beneath a magnificent chandelier. The police see a heart attack, but Hercule Poirot sees a performance. One suspect is lying, one is hiding a terrible secret, and the murderer has made only one tiny mistake, a mistake Poirot noticed immediately. The curtain rises, and the real killer is already on the stage. Chapter 1. The stage is set. The Hôtel de Paris in Monte Carlo was the perfect stage for tragedy. Elegant, refined, glittering beneath chandeliers of cut crystal, it gathered beneath one roof everything society loved to display: diamonds, silk, champagne, money, and perfectly practiced smiles. On that December evening in 1938, the casino beyond its marble corridors hummed with piano music and the soft clatter of roulette, while the rain pressed silver fingers against the tall windows. Then, shortly after 11, Sir Reginald Ashcombe was found dead beneath the great chandelier of the private Salon des Étoiles. He lay on the polished parquet as though some invisible director had placed him there for maximum effect. His dinner jacket was immaculate, his white tie perfectly straight, and one hand rested upon his chest, while the other lay open beside him, the fingers curved around nothing. A broken champagne glass glittered near his shoulder, and the chandelier above him trembled slightly whenever the winter wind touched the old windows. The police saw a wealthy Englishman who had perhaps suffered a heart attack after drinking too much champagne. Hercule Poirot saw something very different. Someone had arranged the scene, and someone had performed the part of an innocent witness. The first to discover the body was Lady Celia Ashcombe, Sir Reginald's much younger wife, who had entered the salon to retrieve a diamond bracelet she claimed to have forgotten. She screamed with remarkable precision, collapsed against the velvet curtain, and allowed her handkerchief to fall dramatically onto the floor. Behind her came Dr. Lucien Marchand, the casino physician, Julian Bellamy, Sir Reginald's secretary, Countess Elena Varga, an old friend of the Ashcombes, and Marcel Duval, the casino's discreet maître d'hôtel. Each stopped in the doorway. Each stared. Each wore a different expression of horror. Watch this performance carefully, mon ami. Lady Celia's grief was immediate, but curiously contained. Julian Bellamy looked terrified, yet his eyes kept returning to the broken glass. Countess Varga was pale and motionless, her gloved hands clasped beneath her chin. Dr. Marchand moved toward the body with professional calm, while Marcel Duval remained beside the door as though guarding the entrance to a theater whose final scene had already begun. The rain whispered against the windows, the grandfather clock ticked in the adjoining hall, and somewhere in the casino a pianist played a slow, melancholy waltz. Then the door opened again. A small man entered. His evening clothes were immaculate, his shoes polished, his magnificent moustache arranged with almost architectural precision. He paused just inside the salon and looked first at the body, then at the chandelier, then at the people surrounding the corpse. His green eyes seemed to take in everything without appearing to study anything. "Mon Dieu," murmured Inspector Henri Lambert. "Monsieur Poirot." Poirot inclined his egg-shaped head. "Yes, and I am afraid, Inspector, that you have not merely a death here. You have a performance." The inspector frowned. "A performance? Mais oui. Look at them." Poirot made a small gesture toward the assembled guests. "They are actors. Lady Celia turned sharply. Poirot noticed. The movement was tiny. Most people would have missed it. But the careful observer, and you are becoming a careful observer, mon ami, would have noticed that Lady Celia's eyes did not go to her husband's body. They went to Poirot. Sir Reginald was murdered, Poirot said quietly. The room seemed to contract. Dr. Marchand looked up. Julian Bellamy swallowed. Countess Varga closed her eyes, and Lady Celia, for just 1 second, smiled. Then the mask returned. Poirot saw it. He touched his moustache thoughtfully. "The stage is set," he murmured. "Now we shall see who remembers their lines." The stage was set. The players assembled. Let the drama begin. Chapter 2. Enter the players. The first scene took place in the library, where the fire burned warmly beneath a carved marble mantel and the scent of furniture wax mingled with Cuban cigar smoke. Crystal glasses stood untouched upon a silver tray, and a coffee service had been brought in, its dark continental aroma filling the room. Outside, the terrace was cold and wet, but inside the library, the velvet curtains shut out the rain and created the strange intimacy of a private theatre. Poirot sat in a high-backed chair, while Inspector Lambert stood beside the fireplace with his notebook. "Let us begin with the cast," said Poirot. The first actor was Lady Celia Ashcombe. She entered, wearing a black silk evening gown, a string of pearls around her throat, and soft kid gloves upon her hands. Her perfume was delicate, but expensive, something floral and unmistakably Parisian. She sat with her back straight and her expression composed, though a tremor passed through one gloved finger. "You adored your husband?" Poirot asked. "Of course." Too quickly. Poirot watched her. "Then why did you tell the inspector yesterday that Sir Reginald intended to change his will?" Her eyes hardened. "He told me nothing about such a thing. A moment ago you said you knew nothing." "I said I knew nothing about his intentions." "Ah," Poirot smiled. A missed cue. The second actor was Julian Bellamy, Sir Reginald's secretary. Bellamy was 32, handsome, carefully groomed, and dressed in a dinner jacket that seemed slightly too formal for his age. He smelled faintly of sandalwood cologne, and his fingers repeatedly straightened the edge of his crisp linen cuff. "Where were you at 10:30? "In the writing room." "Alone?" "Yes." "Doing what?" "Preparing correspondence." Poirot's eyes brightened. Correspondence for whom? For Sir Reginald. But Sir Reginald was in the salon. Bellamy hesitated. Letters he had dictated earlier. The answer was smooth. Too smooth. "This performance, it is rehearsed," Poirot murmured. "Truth does not rehearse," Bellamy heard him. His face changed, only slightly. The third actor was Countess Elena Varga. She had known Sir Reginald for nearly 20 years, first in London, then in Paris, Vienna, and Monte Carlo. She wore a dark emerald gown, and the fabric rustled softly whenever she moved. Her beauty had matured into something severe and compelling, but there was fatigue beneath her eyes. "You and Sir Reginald were friends?" asked Poirot. "Yes, only friends." The Countess looked directly at him. "Only friends." Poirot waited. "Then why," he asked, "did Sir Reginald keep your photograph inside his desk?" The Countess's lips parted. She said nothing. The mask slipped. The fourth actor was Dr. Lucien Marchand. He entered smelling faintly of tobacco and antiseptic, his tweed jacket contrasting with the formal elegance of the room. He had examined Sir Reginald's body and initially declared the death consistent with heart failure. "You now believe it was murder. I believe there are questions." "Ah, questions are the beginning of truth." Marchand looked uncomfortable. "Sir Reginald had a weak heart," he said. "He was under considerable stress." "From what?" I cannot discuss a patient's private affairs. Poirot leaned forward. But you can discuss his death. Yes. Interesting. The fifth actor was Marcel Duval, the maître d'hôtel. He was 50, discreet, immaculately dressed, and possessed the controlled expression of a man who had spent half his life observing wealthy people without allowing them to know it. He spoke softly and remembered everything. Who entered the salon tonight? Sir Reginald at 9:40. Lady Celia at 10:15. Mr. Bellamy at 10:30. Countess Varga at 10:40. Dr. Marchand at 10:45. And yourself at 10:50. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Then why did you tell Inspector Lambert that you did not enter until 11? Duval froze. The room became very quiet. The grandfather clock chimed. Once, twice, 3 times. An error, Duval said. Bravo, said Poirot softly, but unconvincing. The interviews continued until midnight. Everyone had a role. Lady Celia played the grieving widow. Bellamy played the loyal secretary. Countess Varga played the wounded friend. Marchand played the rational physician. Duval played the invisible servant who saw nothing. Yet, every one of them had missed a cue. The broken champagne glass had no champagne upon it. Sir Reginald's right hand smelled faintly of bitter almonds. The carpet beneath the body was dry, and the chandelier chain, though apparently untouched, carried a tiny smear of wax. Poirot stood beneath the great crystal fixture. You watch with Poirot, non? He said to the inspector. You see the chandelier. You see the body. You see the broken glass. But what do you observe? Lambert stared upward. I observe a chandelier. Exactly. Poirot smiled. You see, but you do not observe the performance. The players had entered. But who performed truth, and who performed lies? Chapter 3. The First Act. Morning brought a pale Mediterranean sun, but the hotel seemed unable to warm itself after the night's violence. The corridors smelled of lilies from the conservatory, furniture polish, and yesterday's cigar smoke, while servants moved quietly across the parquet as though afraid to disturb an audience. In the Salon des Étoiles, the chandelier had been left exactly as Poirot had found it. Its crystal drops caught the morning light and scattered it across the walls like fragments of broken mirrors. Poirot stood alone before the body site. The performance, he said. Inspector Lambert looked at him. Lady Celia weeps. Her handkerchief touches her eyes. Her shoulders tremble. Her breathing becomes irregular. Excellent grief. Poirot paused. The tell. He pointed toward the carpet. The handkerchief remained dry. Lambert blinked. Perhaps she had no tears. Precisely. The psychology. Poirot turned toward the windows. I am reminded, mon ami, of an earlier affair in which a suspect had studied the outward signs of shock so carefully that he became almost perfect at displaying them. The eyes widened at the correct moment. The mouth opened. The breathing changed. Even the hands trembled. Yet the body betrayed what the actor could not control. The fingers reached automatically for an ordinary comfort, something the person had done hundreds of times before. Genuine emotion disrupts habit. Performance protects it. When emotion is false, the actor remembers the script. When emotion is genuine, the body forgets the script. Lambert considered this. And Lady Celia. She knew something before she entered this room. Poirot adjusted his moustache with precision. The truth. He pointed toward the salon door. She did not discover the death here. She discovered that the death had happened here. There was a difference, a profound one. Later that afternoon, Poirot arranged for the suspects to meet separately with him in the winter garden. The room smelled of fresh roses and damp earth, and sunlight warmed the glass ceiling. Countess Varga arrived first. "You know why Sir Reginald was afraid," Poirot said. She looked away. "He had enemies. Everyone with money has enemies. He had blackmailers." Poirot became still. "Who?" "I don't know." The Countess touched the pearl clasp at her throat. "You do not believe me." "No." Her eyes flashed. Then she smiled bitterly. "You are insufferable." Frequently. She almost laughed. That tiny laugh was the first genuine emotion Poirot had seen all morning. She told him Sir Reginald had been receiving letters for months. They contained no threats, only fragments of information about his past, a business failure in Vienna, a secret bank account in Geneva, a woman named Elise, and one sentence repeated again and again: "You cannot perform innocence forever." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Where are the letters?" "I don't know." "Who does?" "Bellamy." Another mask, another secret. That evening, Poirot questioned Bellamy again. "You burned letters." "No." "Mais oui." "I did not." "Then why does your right sleeve smell of smoke?" Bellamy looked down. Poirot smiled. "The mask slips. Did you see it?" Bellamy stood abruptly. "You cannot accuse me simply because I burn rubbish." "Not rubbish." Poirot moved closer. "Evidence." Bellamy's face lost its color. "I was protecting Sir Reginald." "From whom?" Bellamy said nothing. Outside, the casino lights began to glow. A piano played somewhere beyond the terrace. The rain had stopped, yet the theater had become darker, for there was now a secret behind the murder that was larger than murder itself. And Poirot knew that whoever had killed Sir Reginald had not merely wished him dead, they had wished him silent. The first mask cracked. More would follow. Chapter 4. Rehearsed Lines. By the third day, the hotel had become a theater of whispers. Guests lowered their voices whenever Poirot passed. Servants exchanged glances beside the lifts, and the scent of strong coffee followed the detectives through corridors, still cool from the night air. In the library, the fire crackled beneath the mantel, while rain returned to the windows. The entire building seemed to wait for the next scene. Poirot began with the alibis. He arranged 5 chairs in a semicircle. "Every actor," he said, "has a script." Inspector Lambert frowned. "A metaphor." "More than a metaphor." Poirot placed a sheet of paper upon the table. "Lady Celia says she entered the salon at 10:15. Bellamy says he saw her leave the corridor at 10:20. Duval says he served her champagne at 10:30. Lady Celia looked at Duval. Duval looked at Bellamy. Bellamy looked at the floor. Poirot smiled. And yet the champagne bottle was opened at 10:12. Silence. Lady Celia spoke. "Then Duval must be mistaken." Duval's jaw tightened. "Perhaps." "No," said Poirot. "He is not mistaken." He turned toward Bellamy. "Because you opened the bottle." Bellamy stared at him. "You poured the champagne into 2 glasses." "No." "One for Sir Reginald." "No." "And one for yourself." Bellamy's expression changed. "I did not drink it." "Exactly." Poirot touched the sheet of paper. "Your fingerprint was found on the second glass." Bellamy sat down. The performance was beginning to strain. Dr. Marchand was next. Poirot asked him to describe Sir Reginald's final moments. "I did not see them, but you know he was frightened." "Yes." "How?" Marchand hesitated. His pulse indicated agitation. "After death." The doctor went pale. Inspector Lambert leaned forward. Poirot's voice became gentle. "Doctor, you examined the body before the police arrived." "Yes." "You moved the right hand. I needed to check the pulse. And you smelled the bitter almonds." Marchand looked at him. "You knew there was poison." "I suspected it, but you said heart failure." "I was uncertain." "No." Poirot's eyes hardened. "You were protecting someone." Marchand stood. "You have no right." "The performance," said Poirot quietly, "is becoming difficult, Doctor." The doctor sat down again. "I treated Lady Celia several months ago." "For what?" "Anxiety." Poirot waited. "She was afraid of Sir Reginald." The revelation changed the room. Lady Celia's face became expressionless. "Afraid?" Marchand nodded. "He threatened to ruin her financially if she left him." Poirot looked at her. "Why would you leave?" Lady Celia laughed once, not theatrically, not softly. It was an ugly, exhausted sound, "because I hated him." The room became still. There it was, the first genuine confession. But hatred was not murder, or perhaps it was. Poirot stood and walked toward the window. "The careful observer knows something important," he said. "When people lie, they often improve their story. They make it cleaner, more logical, more persuasive. Truth is rarely so elegant. Truth contains embarrassment, contradiction, shame. It stumbles." He turned. "Your alibis are too elegant." Nobody spoke. "Therefore they are false." The clock chimed. The tension rose. Someone would break character soon. And Poirot had already decided which actor he would pressure next. Rehearsed lines faltered. The script was failing. Chapter 5. The Mask Slips. That evening, the Salon des Étoiles was opened again. The chandelier glowed above the polished floor, throwing warm light across the cold marble and the velvet curtains. A fire burned in the adjoining room, its warmth carrying the scent of wood smoke, while fresh lilies stood in a crystal vase beneath a portrait of some forgotten aristocrat. Poirot summoned Lady Celia alone. She arrived wearing no jewels. For the first time, she looked tired. "Sit," Poirot said. She did. "You hated Sir Reginald?" "Yes." "You wished him dead?" "Yes." Inspector Lambert, standing behind Poirot, inhaled sharply. Lady Celia looked at him. "But I did not kill him." Poirot studied her. "The performance," he said. "Tonight there is no performance." Her eyes filled. "The tell." He watched her hands. "They are not shaking. The psychology." "Why should they?" "Because you have been afraid." She closed her eyes. Poirot's voice softened. "Fear performs many roles. Sometimes it dresses itself as arrogance, sometimes as cruelty, sometimes as indifference." Lady Celia whispered, "I wanted to leave him. Why did you not? He owned everything. And you?" "I owned nothing." A tear appeared. This time the handkerchief did not come out. The tear simply fell. Poirot waited. Lady Celia told him the truth. Sir Reginald had discovered that she intended to divorce him. He threatened to expose a secret concerning her family. She had gone to the salon that night to confront him, but when she arrived, he was alive. "He was speaking with Bellamy," she said. "About what?" "Money." "How much?" £20,000. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And then?" "I left." "Where did you go?" "To the terrace." "Did you see anyone?" She hesitated. "Yes." "Who?" "Dr. Marchand." That was the missing scene. Marchand had not merely been the physician. He had been part of the backstage drama. Poirot questioned him immediately. "You lied." Marchand stared at him. "I did not." "You were in the terrace corridor." "I went there to smoke." "You spoke with Lady Celia?" "Yes." "About Sir Reginald?" "Yes." "And then you returned to the salon." Marchand said nothing. Poirot's voice sharpened. "Did you poison him?" "No." The denial came with such force that it sounded genuine. Poirot watched him. "Yes," he said softly. "That is how the truth sounds." Marchand covered his face. "I did not kill him." "Then who did?" The doctor looked toward the door. "Bellamy." Inspector Lambert moved forward. "Why?" "Because Sir Reginald had discovered that Bellamy had been stealing from him." A second revelation. Then a third. Bellamy had been stealing. but Bellamy denied the murder. "I took the money," he admitted later, "but I did not kill him." "Why should we believe you?" "Because I loved him." Poirot tilted his head. "Loved him? He saved me years ago." Bellamy's eyes filled. "I stole because I was ashamed. He knew. He gave me another chance." Poirot studied him. The emotion was ugly, and therefore possibly genuine. Then Bellamy whispered, "But I saw who entered the salon after Lady Celia left." "Who?" Bellamy looked toward the chandelier. "I never saw the face." "Then what did you see?" "A hand. What was distinctive? A signet ring." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Whose?" Bellamy swallowed. "Countess Varga's." The room seemed to freeze. Countess Elena Varga had performed loyalty, but perhaps loyalty was merely the mask for something else. The mask had fallen. The true face emerged. Chapter 6. Behind the Curtain. The truth behind the murder proved stranger than any of the players had expected. The backstage of the Ashcombe marriage stretched across 20 years, through London drawing rooms, Viennese hotels, gambling rooms in Paris, and secret meetings in Monte Carlo. Poirot discovered that the Countess had once been Sir Reginald's fiancée. She had left him after learning that he had ruined her family's fortune through a financial scheme that he later concealed. The Countess admitted everything. "Yes," she said. "I hated him. Did you kill him?" "No." "Why should Poirot believe you?" "Because if I wanted him dead, I would not have waited 20 years. Poirot smiled faintly. "An excellent answer." But the ring remained. Countess Varga's signet ring had indeed been seen near the salon, only it had not been on her hand. It had been missing. Someone had borrowed it, someone who understood exactly what its appearance would imply. This was the psychology of deception. People do not merely lie to conceal themselves. They lie to redirect suspicion. A clever murderer does not always create an alibi. Sometimes he creates another suspect. He leaves behind a clue, not because it proves his innocence, but because it appears to prove someone else's guilt. The most dangerous mask is therefore not innocence. It is accusation. Poirot explained this to Inspector Lambert beside the fire. "You see, mon ami, the murderer understood theatre." He arranged several objects upon the table: the signet ring, the broken glass, a letter, and the tiny wax fragment found upon the chandelier chain. Each object is a prop. Lambert stared at them. "And the murder?" "The performance." Poirot pointed to the wax. "Why wax?" "To secure something." "Exactly." He revealed the missing detail. A thin cord had been attached to the chandelier mechanism. The cord had been used to release a concealed spring mechanism that dropped a poisoned object into Sir Reginald's champagne. It was ingenious, but it required preparation, and it required someone who knew the salon well, someone familiar with its lights, curtains, service arrangements, and hidden maintenance passages, someone who had worked there for years. Marcel Duval. When confronted, Duval did not deny knowing the mechanism. "I have served this hotel for 25 years. Then you know every backstage passage." "Yes, and Sir Reginald knew that." "Yes." "Did he threaten you?" Duval's face remained calm. "He threatened everyone." "Why?" Duval looked toward the rain. "Because he had bought debts." "What debts?" "My daughter's." Poirot became silent. There it was. Not greed. Love. Love performing as loyalty. Duval had protected someone, but had he killed for her? "No," Duval said. Poirot looked at him sharply. "I did not kill him. How do you know what I was about to ask?" Duval's face changed. "A tiny mistake. A missed cue." Poirot smiled. "Ah." Duval looked down. "Bellamy told me," he said. "Bellamy told you what?" "That you suspected me." The room fell silent. Poirot's green eyes gleamed. There was another connection. Someone had been warning the suspects about his investigation. Someone had access to every conversation. Someone who moved freely between them. Poirot looked toward the corridor. "Behind every curtain," he murmured, "there is a secret, and behind every secret, a motive." That night, Poirot discovered the final piece, a hotel register. One name had been altered. The ink was fresh. The original entry had been scratched away. Beneath it was a faint impression. Poirot held the page beneath the lamp. He read the name. Then he smiled. The murderer had not merely entered the stage. The murderer had directed it. Behind every curtain, a secret. Every secret, a motive. Chapter 7. The Final Act. At 11 o'clock, Poirot assembled the entire cast in the Salon des Étoiles. Rain had ceased, leaving the windows black and reflective, while the chandelier blazed above them like an enormous spotlight. Champagne stood untouched on the table, its bubbles rising silently inside crystal glasses. The fire crackled nearby, and the room smelled of wax, flowers, smoke, and expensive perfume. Lady Celia stood beside the fireplace, Bellamy near the piano, Countess Varga beneath the portrait, Dr. Marchand by the door, Marcel Duval at the far wall, and Poirot in the center. "The cast is assembled," he said. No one moved. "Mesdames et messieurs, you have each performed for Poirot, some truthfully, some not." He smiled. "Let us review the performances, shall we?" He turned toward Lady Celia. "You played the grieving widow." She looked down. "But the grief was costume. You knew your husband was dead before you entered the room because you had already seen the empty champagne glass and understood what had happened." Lady Celia shook her head. "I did not kill him. I know." Poirot moved on. "Mr. Bellamy, you played the loyal secretary." Bellamy's jaw tightened. "You stole money, burned letters, and lied about your movements. But I did not kill him. No, your crime was greed, not murder." Bellamy lowered his eyes. Poirot turned to Countess Varga. "You played the loyal friend." The Countess looked directly at him. "Your ring was used to create suspicion." "You found it?" "I did." "You knew?" "I knew everything, except the final piece." Poirot turned to Dr. Marchand. "You played the rational physician." Marchand's face was pale. "You knew poison was involved before the police did. You concealed that because you feared Lady Celia would be blamed." "I did." Poirot nodded. "Your lie was motivated by compassion." Finally, he turned toward Marcel Duval. "You played the invisible servant." Duval said nothing. "But innocent servants do not alter hotel registers." Duval looked up. Poirot held the register in his hand. "This entry was changed after Sir Reginald's death." Duval stared at it. "I did not alter it." "No," Poirot smiled. "You protected the person who did." Every eye turned toward the remaining suspects. Poirot raised one finger. "And so we come to our leading performer." Silence. The murderer gave the most convincing performance of all. Shock, outrage, helpful cooperation. Magnifique. He turned. "Dr. Marchand?" "No." "Lady Celia?" "No." "Bellamy?" "No." "Countess Varga?" The Countess stared at him. Poirot's gaze moved beyond them, toward the door. "Inspector Lambert." The inspector stepped forward. Poirot shook his head. "Not you." He looked at the maître d'hôtel. "Marcel Duval?" "No." Then Poirot pointed toward the final person in the room. "The murderer is Dr. Lucien Marchand." Marchand closed his eyes. Lady Celia gasped. Bellamy stepped backward. Poirot continued. "Doctor, you knew exactly how the poison would affect Sir Reginald. You knew his heart condition. You knew the champagne would conceal the first symptoms. You entered through the service passage and used the chandelier mechanism to release the poisoned capsule. Marchand whispered, "You cannot prove it." "Mais oui." Poirot held up the wax fragment. The cord was secured with surgical wax. The same unusual mixture was found in your medical case. Marchand stared. "But anyone could have—" "No." Poirot's voice became almost gentle. "You made one error." Marchand looked at him. "One small moment, when the mask slipped." Poirot pointed toward the corpse's memory. "When you first examined Sir Reginald, you said he had suffered a heart attack." "Yes, but you had not yet touched the body." Marchand froze. "You knew where the symptoms would appear before examining him." The doctor looked at his hands. Poirot continued. "Then, when Lady Celia entered, you told her not to touch the champagne glass. I was protecting evidence." "No, you were protecting yourself." Marchand's shoulders collapsed. The performance was over. He confessed. Sir Reginald had blackmailed him years earlier after discovering a medical scandal that could have destroyed his career. When Sir Reginald threatened to expose him again, Marchand decided that death was the only escape. But there was one final irony. Sir Reginald had planned to confess his own crimes the following morning. He intended to return stolen money. He intended to release Lady Celia. He intended to make amends. Marchand had killed a man who, at the final moment, had begun to remove his own mask. Poirot looked around the room. "You see the tragedy." No one answered. The murderer believed Sir Reginald was incapable of change. He judged the future by the past. Poirot drew himself up to his full height. And that is the danger of theatre. We become so accustomed to the role that we believe the actor can never change. Dr. Marchand lowered his head. Inspector Lambert approached. The final act was complete. The curtain fell. Only truth survived the curtain call. Chapter 8. Curtain Call. The morning after the confession was strangely peaceful. Sunlight poured across the marble floors, turning the crystal chandelier into a constellation of tiny suns, while servants opened the tall windows to let in the fresh Mediterranean air. The scent of roses replaced the smoke of the previous nights, and somewhere in the hotel kitchen came the comforting aroma of strong coffee and warm bread. Justice had begun its slow, practical work. Dr. Marchand was taken into custody. Bellamy was questioned about the thefts, but his cooperation earned him consideration from the authorities. Countess Varga left Monte Carlo quietly, her face free of the bitterness she had worn when she first arrived. Lady Celia remained for several days, no longer pretending to grieve a marriage she had long ago abandoned emotionally. Marcel Duval received the strangest fate. Poirot had discovered that he had altered the register to protect Bellamy, not Marchand. Duval had known that Bellamy was stealing and had concealed it because Bellamy had once saved Duval's daughter from financial ruin. "Your loyalty was misplaced," Poirot told him. "Yes, but not entirely without honor." Duval lowered his head. "I do not know whether that comforts me." "It should not." Poirot smiled. "Justice is not designed to comfort." The suspects had been stripped of their masks. Lady Celia no longer performed grief. Bellamy no longer performed innocence. Countess Varga no longer performed loyalty. Marchand could no longer perform respectability. Duval could no longer perform invisibility. The stage itself seemed transformed. What had been an elegant salon was now merely a room. The chandelier was only a chandelier. The velvet curtains were only velvet. The crystal glasses were only glasses. The theatre had disappeared because the audience now knew the trick. Poirot stood beneath the chandelier. Inspector Lambert joined him. "You were right from the beginning," he said. Poirot shook his head. "Not from the beginning." "No? I was suspicious from the beginning." He smiled. "That is different." Outside, The casino bells sounded. Guests returned to their games. Music returned to the halls. Life resumed its performance. But perhaps the people who had witnessed the murder would never again look at a smiling face quite so simply. Poirot adjusted his gloves. "No applause," he said. "Only justice. No applause for this performance. Only justice." Chapter 9. After the show. 2 days after the confession, the Hôtel de Paris had begun to forget its dead. The casino had reopened its private rooms, the musicians had returned to their places, and the polished corridors once again carried the soft rhythm of evening footsteps. The smell of Cuban cigars drifted from the smoking salon, champagne corks popped behind closed doors, and somewhere beneath the great staircase, a waiter hurried past carrying a silver tray of coffee. Yet the Salon des Étoiles remained strangely quiet, its chandelier shining above an empty floor, as though the theatre itself were waiting for the audience to leave. Hercule Poirot stood at the entrance and looked inside. "Ah," he murmured, "it is always interesting after the performance." Inspector Henri Lambert joined him. "You mean after the murder?" No, mon ami. After the performance." Lambert frowned. Poirot smiled. "The murder is only one scene. The performance begins before the crime and continues long after it." The inspector glanced into the salon. The room had changed. The same velvet curtains hung beside the windows. The same polished mahogany tables stood against the walls. The same crystal chandelier glittered overhead. Yet somehow the elegance seemed diminished. What had once appeared magnificent now seemed artificial, almost theatrical. The room had lost its audience, and without an audience, the props no longer possessed their magic. Poirot walked slowly across the parquet. "Observe." He stopped beneath the chandelier. "This was once the center of our drama." Lambert looked upward. "And now? Now it is merely a chandelier." That, Poirot thought, was perhaps the strangest transformation of all. A beautiful object could become sinister when associated with death. A harmless room could become frightening when connected to a crime. Yet once the truth was known, the objects returned to themselves. The chandelier was only crystal and brass. The salon was only a room. The curtains were only velvet. The stage disappeared when the actors left. Inspector Lambert handed Poirot a folder. The final reports. Poirot accepted it. Ah, the curtain call. He opened the folder. The first report concerned Dr. Lucien Marchand. He had confessed completely. He admitted that Sir Reginald had discovered an old professional scandal and used the information to control him. For years, Marchand had lived beneath the threat of exposure. When Sir Reginald recently threatened to destroy his reputation, Marchand decided that the only way to silence him was death. He had prepared the poison carefully. He had studied the layout of the salon. He had used the chandelier mechanism. He had planted Countess Varga's ring to redirect suspicion. And afterward he had performed the role of the shocked physician. Poirot closed the folder. His tragedy, he said, was not that he feared disgrace. His tragedy was that he believed disgrace was worse than murder. Lambert nodded. "Do you think he regrets it?" Poirot considered. "Yes." "Because he feels guilty?" "Partly." Poirot's green eyes became thoughtful. "But guilt is not always regret, mon ami." Lambert waited. "Sometimes a man regrets the consequences of his crime, not the crime itself. He regrets being caught. He regrets losing his future. He regrets causing pain to people he cares about. True remorse requires something deeper." "What?" "To see the victim as a human being again." Poirot closed the folder. "Perhaps Dr. Marchand will reach that point. Perhaps." The second report concerned Julian Bellamy. Bellamy had admitted stealing money from Sir Reginald over several months. The theft had begun with a small amount, then grown. Each time he promised himself it would be the last. Each time another debt or emergency appeared, and another envelope disappeared from Sir Reginald's safe. Yet Bellamy had not murdered him. His crime had been greed mixed with shame. Poirot had seen that distinction clearly. Bellamy had been afraid of being exposed as a thief. He had therefore played the loyal secretary with almost desperate enthusiasm. He had protected Sir Reginald's reputation because protecting Sir Reginald meant protecting his own secret. The role had become a prison. When the truth finally emerged, Bellamy seemed almost relieved. "Interesting," Poirot remarked. "Relieved to be accused?" "No?" Poirot looked at Lambert. Relieved to stop performing. Bellamy had spent months pretending to be someone he was not. The moment the mask fell, punishment became almost secondary. At least he no longer needed to remember the script. The third report concerned Countess Elena Varga. She had left Monte Carlo that morning. There had been no dramatic farewell, no tears, no angry speeches, only a small suitcase, a dark traveling coat, and a pair of gloves folded neatly upon the table. She had once loved Sir Reginald. Then she had hated him. For years she had performed indifference. But Poirot knew better. Indifference required effort when feeling remained alive beneath it. The Countess had not killed Sir Reginald because she wanted something more difficult than revenge. She wanted freedom from him. Poirot had watched her as she stood beneath the portrait on the night of the revelation. She had expected to be accused. Perhaps she had even believed that she deserved suspicion. But when Poirot announced that her ring had been used as a false clue, something changed in her expression. For the first time, she understood that the past no longer controlled her. Her role had ended. She was no longer Sir Reginald's former fiancée, no longer his victim, no longer his enemy. She could simply become Elena Varga again. That transformation pleased Poirot. "Not every ending is punishment," he said. Lambert looked at him. "Some are freedom." The inspector smiled. "And Lady Celia?" Poirot turned toward the window. Lady Celia Ashcombe had remained at the hotel for several days after the murder. During that time, she had stopped wearing black. She had removed the pearls she had worn on the first night and replaced them with a simple silk scarf. Her expression was calmer. The widow's costume had disappeared. She had begun divorce proceedings against Sir Reginald's estate. But there was something more important. She had admitted that she felt relief. At first, she had been ashamed of that relief. Society would have judged her cruel. But Poirot had told her something she would remember for the rest of her life. "Madame, relief is not murder." She had looked at him. "You don't think I am heartless?" "No." "Then what am I?" Poirot had smiled. "A woman who has been released from a prison." Now, standing in the empty salon, Poirot remembered that conversation. The theatre had forced Lady Celia to play the grieving widow, but once the audience disappeared, she could finally speak honestly. That was the strange power of truth. It did not always make people happier, but it made them free. Inspector Lambert turned another page. "And Duval?" Poirot sighed. Marcel Duval had resigned from the hotel. He had not been the murderer, but he had altered the register and concealed information from the police. His motive had been loyalty to Bellamy, whom he believed he was protecting from disgrace. His punishment was less severe, but Poirot considered his lesson perhaps the most important. Duval thought loyalty meant silence, Poirot said. Was he wrong? Sometimes. Poirot's voice became quiet. Loyalty is not always protecting a person from consequences. Sometimes loyalty means preventing them from becoming worse. Lambert considered that. So he should have told the truth sooner. Mais oui. Poirot looked toward the door. Theatre teaches us this also. An actor may believe he is helping another actor by covering his mistake, but when one performer forgets his lines, the whole scene can collapse. The hotel had changed. The people had changed. Even the staff seemed to move differently through the corridors. There were fewer whispers now. The guests had stopped staring at one another. The servants no longer lowered their voices when Poirot approached. The mystery had become a story. Soon, it would become an anecdote. Then, eventually, a footnote. That was the way society healed itself. It transformed tragedy into conversation. Poirot understood this. He had seen it many times. The human mind could not remain permanently inside a crisis. It built distance. It converted fear into memory. It replaced the terrible present with an orderly past. First there was the murder, then the investigation, then the confession. Finally, that unfortunate business at Monte Carlo. The words changed. The emotional weight changed. The theatre emptied. But the lessons remained. Poirot returned once more to the Salon des Étoiles that evening. He had not intended to. His train was scheduled for the following morning, and his luggage had already been packed. Yet something had drawn him back. Perhaps it was the chandelier. Perhaps it was the silence. Perhaps it was simply that Poirot disliked leaving a stage before he had taken one final look at it. The room was illuminated only by the chandelier. No fire burned, no music played, no champagne stood upon the tables. The crystal was silent. Poirot walked to the center of the room. He looked at the place where Sir Reginald had fallen. For several moments he said nothing. Then he spoke quietly. Poor man. There was no sympathy for the crimes Sir Reginald had committed. But Poirot had learned something during the investigation. A person could be cruel and still be human. A victim could have been unpleasant. A murderer could have once been kind. An innocent person could tell a lie. The world rarely divided itself neatly between heroes and villains. That was another theatrical illusion. Real life was messier. People changed roles. People contradicted themselves. People loved and hated the same person. They lied to protect themselves. They lied to protect others. They sometimes lied because the truth frightened them. And occasionally, they lied until the lie became more important than life itself. Poirot looked upward. The chandelier reflected his small figure in dozens of tiny crystal surfaces. One Poirot became 10. 10 became 20. Each reflection wore the same expression. He smiled. Audience, director, actor, he murmured. Sometimes we are all three. He turned away. As he crossed the room, his footsteps echoed across the parquet. 1, 2, 3. The sound seemed strangely loud. At the door, he stopped. He looked back one final time. The room was empty. No actors. No audience. No murderer. No victim. Only the stage. And perhaps that was the true ending. Not the arrest. Not the confession. Not the newspaper report. The true ending came when the room ceased to be a theater of crime and became ordinary again. Outside, the casino lights shimmered against the dark Mediterranean sky. A distant piano began to play. Poirot stepped into the corridor. The hotel was alive once more. A waiter carried fresh flowers toward the dining room. A couple laughed beside the staircase. Someone opened a bottle of champagne. The sound of the cork echoed softly through the marble hall. Poirot smiled. Life had resumed its performance. But now he knew that beneath every elegant dinner there might be a secret. Behind every polite smile, a private struggle. Behind every confident voice, perhaps a little fear. And behind every mask, a human face waiting to be understood. The following morning, Poirot boarded the train. The leather seat was warm, the polished wood gleamed in the morning light, and a pot of strong coffee waited beside him. As the train pulled away from Monte Carlo, the sea flashed briefly between the buildings, bright beneath the morning sun. Inspector Lambert stood on the platform until the train disappeared. Poirot watched him through the window. Then he settled comfortably into his seat. The case was finished. The murderer had been exposed. The innocent had been cleared. The masks had been removed. Yet Poirot knew better than anyone that another theatre would eventually appear, another house, another hotel, another train, another elegant gathering of people who believed themselves safe, and somewhere among them would be an actor who had rehearsed too carefully, a person whose grief was too perfect, a smile held too long, a hand that trembled at the wrong moment, a silence where there should have been words. Poirot closed his eyes. The theatre never truly ended. It merely changed stages. The theatre emptied. The lessons remained. Chapter 10. Poirot reviews the performance. The train moved steadily through the French countryside, its wheels beating a patient rhythm against the rails. Inside Hercule Poirot's compartment, everything was arranged according to order and method. The silver pot of tisane stood precisely beside the porcelain cup. His gloves rested parallel to one another, and a folded newspaper lay untouched upon the polished wooden table. Beyond the glass, fields slipped past beneath a pale winter sky, while the occasional farmhouse appeared and disappeared like scenery changing behind a theatre curtain. Monte Carlo was already becoming a memory. Poirot sat quietly. The murder was finished. The murderer was known. The actors had departed. And yet, for Hercule Poirot, the drama was not quite over. A mystery does not truly end when the criminal is arrested. It ends when the detective understands why the crime happened, why the deception worked, why certain people behaved as they did, and why the truth remained hidden until the final moment. Poirot lifted his cup. "The case," he murmured, "is solved." He took a sip of tisane. "But the psychology, mon ami, that is another matter." He looked toward the window. The reflection staring back at him seemed almost theatrical. The egg-shaped head, the magnificent moustache, the immaculate clothes, the watchful green eyes. For a moment, he imagined himself sitting before an empty audience. And perhaps, in a way, he was. You had watched the entire performance. You had seen the chandelier. You had seen the corpse. You had watched the suspects enter. You had listened to their stories. You had watched the masks slip. And now Poirot wished to review the performance with you, because the real question was never simply, who killed Sir Reginald Ashcombe? The deeper question was, why did everyone need to perform? Poirot placed his cup down. Let us begin there. Human beings, he knew, wore masks for reasons both ordinary and profound. A mask could be created from fear. A person might pretend to be confident because admitting fear would make them vulnerable. A mask could be created from shame. A person might lie about a failure because they could not bear another person's judgment. A mask could be created from love. A parent might hide anxiety from a child. A husband might pretend indifference because admitting jealousy would expose insecurity. A mask could even be created from kindness. Someone might tell a comforting lie because the truth would cause unnecessary pain. Therefore, the mask itself was not always wicked. The danger began when the mask became more important than the face beneath it. Lady Celia had worn the mask of the grieving widow. Why? Because society expected it. Her husband was dead. She was supposed to cry. She was supposed to appear devastated. She was supposed to mourn. But the truth was more complicated. She had lived under the control of a man she hated. His death had brought her grief, certainly, but it had also brought relief. What would society have done with that truth? It would have judged her. People are uncomfortable with complicated emotions. They want grief to look like grief. They want love to look like love. They want hatred to look like hatred. But human emotion rarely obeys such neat rules. A person can mourn someone they hated. A person can love someone who has hurt them. A person can feel relief when someone dies and still feel genuine sorrow. The theater of society does not like contradictions. So people perform. Lady Celia performed because the world demanded a role. Julian Bellamy performed because shame demanded one. Countess Varga performed because old love and old hatred had become too painful to reveal. Marcel Duval performed because loyalty had become confused with silence. And Dr. Marchand performed because fear had become stronger than conscience. That was the progression. One mask after another, one performance after another, one lie leading to another. Poirot leaned back. The murderer, he said softly, was not born upon the night of the murder. The crime had begun much earlier. It had begun when Marchand decided that exposure would be unbearable. Then came fear, then resentment, then justification, then preparation. Finally, murder. This was important. Crimes rarely appeared from nowhere. There was usually a psychological staircase. The first step was thought. The second was permission. The third was rationalization. The fourth was action. Marchand had climbed every step. He had told himself that Sir Reginald deserved punishment. He had convinced himself that the threat to his reputation justified extraordinary measures. He had transformed himself from a frightened man into an executioner. But there was something else. Marchand had not considered himself a murderer. That was perhaps the most dangerous mask of all. He had thought of himself as a desperate man solving a problem. People often do this. They rename their actions. A thief calls himself resourceful. A liar calls himself protective. A jealous person calls themselves devoted. A cruel person calls themselves honest. A murderer may call himself a victim. The words become costumes, and once the costume is accepted, the person no longer sees the truth clearly. Poirot remembered an earlier case from his career. There had been a man who insisted that he had never lied to his wife. Not once. Yet Poirot discovered that the man had hidden letters, concealed money, invented meetings, and manipulated several people. When confronted, the man protested, "I never lied. I only protected her from unnecessary truths." Poirot had found the statement fascinating. The man genuinely believed it. He had constructed a psychological world in which deception was not deception. It was protection. This is how human beings can deceive themselves. And self-deception is often more powerful than deception of others. A person can deceive another human being for a few minutes, a few months, perhaps even years. But self-deception can last a lifetime. Poirot looked again at the passing countryside. The landscape had changed. The fields had given way to villages. Smoke rose from chimneys. Children walked beside the road. Ordinary life continued. That too was part of the mystery. Crime creates the illusion that the entire world has stopped. For the victim's family, time stops. For the investigators, time becomes evidence. For the suspects, time becomes fear. But outside the crime scene, the world continues. Trains run. Clocks chime. Coffee is served. Flowers bloom. People laugh. Someone falls in love. Someone receives bad news. Someone plans tomorrow. The theater of one person's tragedy exists beside the ordinary performances of thousands of others. Poirot understood this deeply. That was why he never considered murder merely a puzzle. A puzzle has pieces. Human beings have consequences. A murdered man leaves behind memories. A murderer leaves behind damaged lives. An innocent suspect carries the experience of accusation. A witness may never again trust what they see. The crime continues after the police leave. That was why the aftermath mattered. Lady Celia had to rebuild her life. Bellamy had to confront his dishonesty. Countess Varga had to release herself from the past. Duval had to understand that loyalty without truth could become another form of harm. And Marchand had to live with the knowledge that fear had transformed him into the very thing he had once feared. Poirot sighed. "The curtain falls," he said, "but the actors must still live with the roles they played." He thought of guilt. Guilt was another theater. Some guilty people became restless. Some became quiet. Some became excessively helpful. Some became angry when questioned. Some became charming. Others became cold. There was no single physical sign of guilt. That was an important lesson. A trembling hand did not prove murder. A steady voice did not prove innocence. Tears did not prove grief. Anger did not prove guilt. Even fear did not prove deception. The body could reveal conflict, but conflict was not the same as guilt. That was why Poirot never relied upon one gesture. He looked for patterns, contradictions, timing, motivation, and most importantly, psychological necessity. He asked, "What does this person need me to believe?" That question was often more revealing than, "What are they telling me?" Dr. Marchand needed Poirot to believe he was merely the concerned physician. That was why he performed professionalism so carefully. Bellamy needed Poirot to believe he was loyal. That was why he overplayed devotion. Lady Celia needed Poirot to believe she was grieving. That was why her tears appeared too quickly. Countess Varga needed everyone to believe she no longer cared. That was why her indifference was so controlled. The moment Poirot identified the role, he could examine the actor. That was the essence of the theater system. The crime scene was the stage. The suspects were actors. Their statements were scripts. Their gestures were performances. Their secrets were hidden backstage. And Poirot was the director who refused to accept the first version of the play. But there was another character, the listener, you. At the beginning of the case, you watched. You were given the same stage, the same suspects, the same clues. Perhaps you suspected Lady Celia, perhaps Bellamy, perhaps the Countess, perhaps Duval. That was exactly the point. A good performance does not tell you what to think. It invites you to make a mistake. The murderer wins when the audience accepts the wrong role. Poirot smiled. "Ah, but you were watching, non? Perhaps you noticed the dry handkerchief. Perhaps you noticed Bellamy's burned letters. Perhaps you noticed the missing ring. Perhaps you noticed the altered register. Perhaps you noticed Marchand's knowledge before he should have possessed it. The careful observer becomes a participant. You stop asking only, who did it? You begin asking, why did she react that way? Why did he need that alibi? Why was that answer too smooth? Why did this person become angry at exactly that moment? That is when the mystery becomes psychological. The little grey cells are not merely solving a sequence of physical events. They are examining human behavior. Poirot glanced at his reflection again. The body knows, he said. Even when the face lies, the body sometimes tells another story. Not always, not perfectly, but sometimes. A murderer can rehearse a sentence. He can rehearse shock. He can rehearse outrage. He can rehearse grief. But he cannot rehearse every involuntary response. A pause, a glance, a breath, a movement toward an object, a reaction to a name, a moment of silence. The smallest interruption in the performance may reveal the entire play. That had been Marchand's mistake. He had remembered the script, but not every cue. Poirot's mind returned to the final confrontation. Marchand had known too much. He knew the symptoms. He knew the poison. He knew what not to touch. He knew what to tell Lady Celia. His knowledge was too precise. His performance was too controlled. And yet, when Bellamy spoke, something changed. One breath, one pause, one moment. The mask slipped. That was enough. Poirot smiled. The truth does not need to shout. Truth is often quiet. A contradiction whispered. A detail overlooked. A sentence spoken too quickly. A name that causes the wrong reaction. A hand that moves before the mind gives permission. That is why truth eventually triumphs over performance, not because truth is always powerful, but because lies require maintenance. A lie must be remembered, protected, repeated, adjusted. Every new question creates another demand. The liar must remember yesterday's version and today's version. He must remember who knows what. He must remember what he told one person and what he told another. The truth has no such burden. The truth can simply exist. That is why Poirot often says that truth does not rehearse. The liar rehearses. The truth waits. Poirot finished his tisane. Outside, the afternoon light had softened. The train continued toward London. He thought about the people left behind in Monte Carlo. The stage had changed them. The murderer had gone from convincing performer to frightened prisoner. The innocent suspect had gone from possible villain to survivor. The elegant salon had gone from glamorous stage to crime scene, and finally back to an ordinary room. Poirot himself had gone from audience to director to revealer, and the listener had gone from passive viewer to active observer. That was the transformation he valued most, because perhaps the greatest lesson of every mystery was not how to catch a murderer, it was how to observe people, how to look beyond appearances, how to recognize that confidence may conceal fear, that anger may conceal pain, that indifference may conceal love, that helpfulness may conceal guilt, that silence may conceal either wisdom or terror. The psychology, Poirot knew, was everything. But psychology without compassion could become another form of judgment. To understand a person was not necessarily to excuse them. Understanding Marchand did not absolve him. Understanding Bellamy did not erase his theft. Understanding Lady Celia did not make every decision she had made correct. It simply revealed why human beings behave as they do, and perhaps that was why Poirot had spent so many years solving mysteries, not because he enjoyed seeing criminals punished, but because every crime presented the same extraordinary question: what happened inside a human mind before the crime happened outside it? That was the true mystery. The body was merely the final evidence. The crime began in thought, then emotion, then decision, then action. Poirot closed his eyes. The train rocked gently beneath him. For a moment he imagined the Monte Carlo chandelier again. The light, the crystal, the velvet, the actors, the silence after the confession. Then the image disappeared. Only the rhythm of the train remained. But Poirot opened his eyes. He reached for the newspaper, but before opening it, he smiled. Somewhere, another stage was waiting. Perhaps an English country house beneath winter snow. Perhaps a luxury train crossing Europe. Perhaps an ocean liner surrounded by black water. Perhaps a theatre filled with actors who believed they were merely pretending. But sooner or later, one performance would become real. Someone would wear a mask. Someone would forget a line. And Hercule Poirot would notice. He placed the newspaper beside him. Until the next theatre of crime, mes amis. He looked toward the window. The last light of day disappeared beyond the horizon. Poirot's reflection remained in the glass. Watching, waiting, observing, always observing. Because every theatre has its curtain. Every performance has its ending. Every mask eventually falls. And somewhere behind the final curtain, truth is always waiting to take its bow. Until the next theatre of crime, mes amis. Poirot watches always,